Good. Okay, so welcome everybody to the Midwest Motus Group Share. My name is Sarah Kendrick. I'm a migratory bird biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm also the chair of the telemetry initiative of the Midwest Migration Network, which is a group of groups across the Midwest region, the Fish and Wildlife Service Midwest region. We also welcome, clearly, our Canadian brothers and sisters from north of us. So welcome and thanks to everyone today. We have a lot to get through, so I'm going to keep it very brief and very on time. I will just say that I will break in verbally and ask people or tell people when you just have 1 minute left of your presentation. I do not mean to be rude in this, so apologies up front. I would ask that everyone please put your name, affiliation, and where you're located in the chat for us, since we don't have time to go through and introduce ourselves, but lots of great people I see on this call and joining us today. So huge thanks for being here. Also, please mute yourselves when you're not speaking or presenting. We would ask that you hold all questions until the end. We have 20 minutes scheduled for questions at the end. I will give myself a gold star if we actually get to the end and we have 20 minutes. It will be a true test of how good a timekeeper I am. So in that spirit, we're 1 minute early already, ahead of schedule. So I'm going to turn it over to Stu. I will quit sharing my screen. And I will turn it over to Stu McKenzie, who is the Director of Strategic Assets at Birds Canada. He's the Motus Big Cheese. He loves it when I call him that. You can tell. You can tell just by the look on his face. So he's going to give an update for 10 minutes from Motus Central. So take it away, Stu. Thanks.
Thanks. Forgive me, I'm not team savvy, although you think I should be.
I know. It's fun.
What am I even sharing with you guys?
I was like, how are you sharing my presentation?
I have no idea.
Let's try it.
Too many windows open.
Yeah, if you've just joined us, Stu's about to present, but please include your name, affiliation, and your location in the chat, please, as a way to introduce. Okay, go ahead, Stu.
What do you guys see?
Your screen, it's perfect. Presentation mode.
Beautiful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So forgive me because I didn't allot a lot of time to prep this, so it's a bit of a combination from previous presentations, and I didn't want to provide too much overlap from the AOS and PIF and various iterations. So I'm going to blast through kind of a little bit of a disorganized update about how we're all mobilizing Motus, or Motus is mobilizing us, and focus on one key expansion underway that will help us, that is of relevance to the Midwest. So again, just forgive me blasting through a bunch of updates. Motus has experienced exceptional growth, almost exponential since we began, and that's great. But with that comes some pretty awesome responsibility that we're all bearing as collaborators, and that Birds Canada and funders and some of our key partners are bearing quite heavily as well, because it's quite the beast to manage, which led us to develop a strategy to 2030, outlines our collective objectives. If you haven't seen it yet, please go on the website and take a look. And it wraps up basically everything we're doing into 4 themes. Of course, they all kind of center around enabling conservation, but it was an easy way to kind of organize the different aspects of the work we're doing. On the pioneering science side of things, we're at 200, we just crossed the 200 publication mark. And I don't actually know if, I can never decide whether that's good or not, but I'd say it's good for now. And when you break that down, migration and migratory stuff is really quite prevalent. But what I find more interesting is when you sort of dig into some of these little subtopics is actually where a lot of the meat of Motus actually is. And I'll get to that in a little bit. And of course, birds are the focus and probably mostly of this, but we can't ignore bats or bugs. And even though most of the publications are birds, I see a lot of growth and a lot of the potential for development and innovation actually coming out of bats and insects as well. So one of the most important things is building community and capacity, and that's what we're doing here today. I just threw this up because I like the picture of Sarah, but then also on that note, yesterday we just wrapped up one of our first like Motus targeted workshops in Costa Rica, more advanced workshop targeting specific Motus methods that will help enable a lot of our capacity in Central America. So that just wrapped up. And in terms of who is Motus, there's a large team at Birds Canada, but it really is everybody, and that includes this regional group and all of the collaborators. I could give a presentation just on this and kind of the dynamics of governance and how we're trying to figure that out. But it really just brings home the team effort. So I'd encourage you to check out some of the new tools we're building. We're fixing something or putting out new stuff every few weeks. And the data dashboard is a new experimental beta where we're providing new ways to explore Motus data in a sort of a more efficient and effective manner. And of course, all of our stuff is available. All the data is available through an R package, which we're also improving. It should get much faster for some of those who have trouble with it soon. And the website we're doing a lot of optimization, which takes a lot of time behind the scenes. So I'm going to skip through some stuff and just talk about one key sort of thing that's going on right now, sort of a key development theme, and that is to explore the use of Motus as a tool for measuring or monitoring survival. And it was Evan's first paper in 2019 that kind of made it to the forefront, where we could compare barn swallows that didn't migrate to those that did migrate as a method of apparent survival. And you boiled that all down to about 42% of barn swallows in southern Ontario surviving to the point of migration. Or another way to look at that is that females need to reproduce 3 times before reproducing themselves. And we've recently scaled up, this is work by Gomez et al. And Nick, who's on the call, to try and measure survival more at a hemispheric level based on the recoveries of blackpolls, gray cheeks, and Swainson's warblers. And this isn't released yet, but you applying typical mark recapture methods, modifications thereof, what is the survival of animals at varying stages along their migration? And there's much more to it than that. I just wanted to sort of highlight survival as a major up and coming topic. And I really think it's something that can drive a collective theme among the network. And there's a working group sort of developing to tackle these questions and methods and approaches. And if you have any questions, please contact Nathan Cooper, the contacts below. We're also looking for funding to try and coordinate as well as enable the methods. To fund a working group, to fund postdocs, to really get this going on the analytical side. And that all sort of stems about this pioneering science fixture of the strategic plan and how pioneering science can drive conservation. I always say Institute for Bird Populations put it out perfectly recently. It was like, support the science that makes conservation work. And that's really what that is all about, including the survival and how it builds community. And then you need to innovate tech to drive that pioneering science. I'll leave you with a fun video. This is a Motus station in Cardel in Mexico, if the video works. Oh, tease. Anyway, there's about, just a couple 100,000 vultures and broadwings flying over a Motus station. That's what that is. So.
Nice.
I kept it to time. That's my super fast Motus update. If you have any questions, please do reach out. I'll put my information in the chat, and we can go from there. Sorry to gloss over a lot.
That's okay. Thank you, Stu. Appreciate that. Always lots of fun, exciting, inspiring work being done from Motus Central and plugging away, trying to keep us all going, and we all just help each other. Or we try to anyway. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Appreciate your leadership as always. Okay, I'm up next. Doing okay on time. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so thanks everybody. Today I'm going to just give a really brief 10-minute regional update on Motus station placement. Just again, very high level. And then an update on the wood thrush Motus tagging project that many of you may know about. If you don't, I'm just going to give a very high level overview of the project, and I'll have my email at the end of the presentation if you have questions. I've asked the presenters who share slides put their emails up so that if we don't have time for questions at the end, to just shoot those folks an email, and you can always email me and I can put you in touch with whoever if you have questions. Okay, so regional update. So Motus coordination in the Midwest has been run through the Midwest Migration Network. It doesn't mean we know of every single station that's being put up. We aren't aware of every single tagging effort we're doing. Really, I serve in the chair of the telemetry initiative for the MMN, just as a point of contact for Motus. I think largely we're kind of an outlet to provide guidance and at least try and educate folks on what it is and how to get involved. We work to expand Motus in the region and beyond, also in the neotropics. Those have been some of the most rewarding friendships and relationships to build, as Stu alluded to in his photos, working with our folks abroad. So we've been plugging away on that. For those who don't know, I used to work for the Missouri Department of Conservation, and I really, thanks to MDC, that agency, for really doing a lot for Motus. Before I came over to the Fish and Wildlife Service, they really kind of took a risk, and that's where we did a lot of the initial grants for programs and projects that have led into these particular projects, including the wood thrush project. So the MMN, the Midwest Migration Network, has a YouTube channel. Just Google it. It'll pop up. We've had past webinars like these, but I, as the Midwest point of contact, realized that I need to do more of these so that we keep in better touch. There's always new people being folded into Motus. So all of these webinars we've had in the past are recorded and online on the YouTube channel. So please access those if they're helpful. We had a virtual conference in 2020, also 22, where we had different days allotted to each of the initiatives of the MMN. That's telemetry, which is ours, which is the best one. Then there's banding and ground surveys run by Mark Shieldcastle. We have acoustics and radar run by Jeff Bueller. And we have wind and wildlife. And I'm completely blanking and feel like a terrible person that I can't remember the point of contact for that. So please forgive me. It's just presentation jitters, not a lack of respect. So we also had a Midwest Motus Tech webinar about station placement. Hardly ever we're able to get into the technical details of station placement, but Todd Alger from the Northeast Motus Collaboration, thank you, Todd, presented to us for almost 2 hours on station placement nitty-gritty. So if you have questions about that, please access that webinar. It's great. We also had a Motus tagging brainstorm session because I was trying to, since we've built up the Motus network so much in the Midwest, now I feel it's, time to start thinking about tagging. So that we had a great brainstorm session on which guilds of species or which species we could focus on, which in part led to the wood thrush project that I'm going to update on. If you want to engage or be placed on our mailing list, which you are if you're here and know about this webinar, but spread the word, please. Our website is midwestmigrationnetwork.org. At the last tech webinar, last December 22, when we had the tech webinar with Todd, I collected information through a Google form to make a Midwest Motus contact list. I still have that list. I have not posted it. I apologize profusely. I will get that out. But I thought if we're having another webinar, I may as well post the form, the Google form, so that you can put in information if you didn't do that last year. So please do that. I can't access the chat while I'm presenting, but I will put that in after I present. Please add your information to that, and we will post that soon. There's questions on that Google form about whether you want your information posted on the website. I would just argue don't fill it out if you don't want at least just basic email, which is all that's on there, and your location and your expertise. So just to say that. So the Midwest Migration Network has kind of a pie in the sky strategic plan for Motus. It's been really gratifying over the last few years to delete a lot of the orange dots, which are our proposed stations, and replace them with yellow dots, which means that we are filling in these gaps. They're mostly in east-west arrays and along our major waterways. This was 2018. This is the growth that has occurred across the Midwest and lots out west. Congrats to Matt Webb and many others, William Blake, all these folks who have built up the network out west as well. Many partners, of course. But that growth is incredible. There's been globally 400% growth in Motus across that time frame, but over 600% growth in the Midwest. So we win. Probably because nobody else has calculated it. But in 2018, we had 35 stations, and in 2023, a few days ago, we had about 214. So go us. So in terms of the wood thrush project, now I'm down to 4 minutes. I'm going to stay on time, I promise. So as part of one of the grants that we got at the state with 9 other partners, we got a competitive state wildlife grant. It funded 3 tagging projects, one of which was with the Conservation Department in Missouri and Selva to deploy 25 tags on wood thrush and 25 tags on golden wing warblers. Hats off to Selva. They did all the field work for this, of course. So we went down for like a week and just, had fun hanging out with them and helped. No, we did help. But we deployed 25 tags on wood thrush, and very generally, we got migratory connectivity to the northeast. These are tracks you see on the screen of 23 wood thrush that were tagged in Costa Rica and Nicaragua. And you can see general migratory connectivity to the northeast and southeastern Canada. And so then that got us to thinking, well, what if we deployed tags across the, if we saw this connectivity from where these birds were tagged to the northeast for breeding, what if we deployed tags across the entire wintering range? And also what would happen if we deployed tags across the entire breeding range? So I went to the flyways, the Atlantic and the Mississippi Flyway, and pitched to state agencies first, asked them to commit to purchasing 25 tags per state or province. And we, challenged them to find an authorized tagger to deploy these in their state. We're also working with NGOs and academia. It's not only limited to states, but we wanted to approach them first because states and provinces are such a great audience to engage from the beginning because they do a lot of the habitat management in these states and provinces. So these folks have delivered. Everyone is very excited about participating in a large-scale Motus tagging project. I counted up yesterday, and 22 states across the eastern US and Ontario are super confirmed, which is my very official. We've had a lot of people show a lot of interest in this project, but I'm trying to confirm with people that they're going to deploy tags next breeding season. So we'll have about 500 breeding season Motus tags deployed in year one, which is summer 24. Selva secured funding to be in charge of the non-breeding tagging. So that's very exciting. So they'll be deploying 150 non-breeding season tags across the wintering range as well in winter 24-25. I'm trying to get, loose confirmations for summer 25, year 2 of the project, and we'll likely have over 200 tags in that. So total, we'll have over 800 Motus tags for this project, potentially deployed from both ends of the wood thrush range. I almost put a picture of Kevin McAllister screaming because that's how professional I am, but then I decided against it. But then I decided against that because this is what I feel like when coordinating this project, but it's also very exciting and inspiring. So some of our research questions that we hope to address with this work is how are individual breeding and wintering populations from across these ranges linked? I will not go through and read all of these because I'm almost out of time. We're also going to be able to hopefully look at survival rates. We're asking that all folks who deploy Motus tags try to deploy their tags within range of an active Motus station on both sides, both on the wintering range and the breeding range side. So that will be very exciting about interannual survival and other survival pre-migration. And look at those population-specific differences. There are some populations that are declining, some that are doing all right. And then conservation implications. We really want this to inform management and conservation, of course. So really focusing those conservation actions with the findings, hopefully making clearer ties from states, at least, of course, in the US through the Southern Wings program to where their birds, their wood thrush are overwintering, trying to make those links a little stronger. Also engaging states. This is acting as proof of concept for that, which is cool. The protocol, we have a common project protocol that's been finalized. We're waiting for a support letter to be included in that to help folks get IACUC or ACUC guidance or approval if they need that with your institution. We're going to have a tagging training for folks who need the training to get authorization for this project to deploy tags on wood thrush. So lots of information coming. Hopefully by next week, we will have this ready. And so it'll be sent out. And I've been in touch with a bunch of folks for the project already. So I know that was very fast. Please email me with any additional questions. I will quit sharing my screen. And I will turn it over now to Kristen Hall. Kristen, go. Oh, I'll stop sharing my screen. Oh, did you take it over? That's good. Okay, she's sharing. You're the best. Okay, Kristen Hall is the Non-Game Wildlife Program Supervisor for Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. And take it away, Kristen. Thank you for presenting today.
I hope that works. Can you guys hear me?
Indeed, I can hear you and I see presenter viewer. Yeah, just push that button and it'll work. Yeah.
Needed to get there. Come on. There we go. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks.
And I can't see anything else, so I feel like I'm blind, but that's okay. Okay, thanks for the opportunity. I will also try to be speedy quick and avoid repeating myself, but I am happy to be a Motus user and part of the Midwest Motus crew that received a competitive SWIG in 2020 or maybe 21. And I, for better or worse, decided I could both deploy towers and tags during that time, which now I realize was very ambitious. So I'll talk really quick about the towers that I've deployed and kind of what we've been hearing to date, and then I'll jump into some of the work that we've been doing with kestrels and where that work is going in the future. So I am with the Minnesota DNR, the Non-Game Wildlife Program, and we partnered with 6 Midwestern states and a couple of countries through Sarah's great leadership on the competitive SWIG. And we all adopted Motus for our research and growing Motus in the Midwest. I was able to put out 10 towers during that time period, and this is just probably not the most clear table, but I just kind of wanted to capture really quick how our towers have been doing. These are the towers I deployed with partners. A lot of the partners have been really awesome in helping me get the towers stood up, as well as maintaining the towers over time. There have been a couple of towers that I've had issues with, and they are able to run out and see if they're still working, what's unplugged, what isn't unplugged. Some of them had a ton of noise to them that we had to reset. And I don't know if that one's quite stood back up again, but this tower is one that we worked with Madison Audubon and put one up just this spring. And it hasn't had any detections. It looks active and it seems to be online. So we're just waiting for our first detection on that one. But otherwise, we've had detections on all of our towers. And here's a bit of a photo array of what some of those different towers look like. They're each like a snowflake, all of them quite different. And putting them up is also, and attaching them to certain things is also quite different. Just wanted to go through the species detections that we've had on all of our towers to date. A lot of them are kestrels, and the reason for that is because I'm deploying Motus on kestrels and aiming for places that have existing Motus towers to do those deployments. So our Carpenter Nature Center partners, we've deployed some Motus tags there. We've worked at Camp Ripley to deploy some tags there. Arden Hills, Arden Hills Army Training Site is the name, AHATS that you see up there. That's where my main study site is. So that one here's only American kestrels all the time. And it is kind of funny that it hasn't hurt any other species, but we're always waiting and always listening to see what we come up with. So we've had quite a few different species that have come through and in varying numbers, and we're still getting detections. We just recently had one a couple of days ago. So pretty exciting stuff. I will keep on going for the sake of time. I'll jump into the kestrel part of my work. So we decided to stand up transmitters on kestrels because that tracking research has not been done very much in the past. Some Western projects on kestrels have been done with telemetry, and then some geotagging had been done as well. Geotagging was very difficult because they don't have high site fidelity. So we figured let's try Motus and see if it works. Kestrels are a funny size. Well, they're great size, but they're not a great size for tracking. So we deployed some transmitters on kestrels because they are in steep decline, and the reasons why seems to be quite elusive. There's actually a really great kestrel working group nationally that is trying to develop some really specific hypothesis to test and try to assess the reasons for decline in kestrels, led by Kristen Davis. That's ongoing right now, and we are listening in and helping out with those conversations as much as possible. So it's a bird of interest across the board. This is what the transmitters look like. We used predominantly CTT tags, the life tags, and we used their hybrid battery solar tags. We also used 3D printed transmitter harness that they developed in cooperation with Cornell, and that's what the tag looks like. This is the whole tag assembly, and this is what it looks like on a kestrel. It's a really slick application process once you get the hang of it. And we really were able to pop them on the bird and then let them go relatively quickly and then observe them afterwards. And we had really no question about tags bothering them or the harnesses bothering them. We did do some tail-mounted tags in the beginning and realized that those weren't quite what we were looking for as far as deployment and staying on the birds, as well as lasting as long as we wanted to. Now they have solar capabilities on those smaller tags. At the time when we tested them, they did not. So We have deployed quite a few tags on kestrels over the last 3 years. We were done with our Motus deployment. We finished up in 2022. Our first round was testing out the system to see what worked and what didn't. We deployed most of our tags in the summer and got our first tower stood up at AHATS right in the end of summer. So we didn't get the, it is a good rule of thumb to always have a tower where you're deploying tags, and we were a little off in our timing. We had quite a few deployed in 21 and quite a few in 22, and we're using them on all ages and both sexes. And I just wanted to highlight this really quick. I'm not going to dive into my results of everything. We did publish a paper in 21. It's in the Journal of Raptor Research, the Kestrel Symposium paper. So if you want to refer to that or get a copy of that, I can help you. But I just wanted to point out this trend here that when I say detections outside the breeding area, that's any detections that are beyond where the bird was hatched and where we first deployed the tag. So that outside of Arden Hills or Saxon Bog is where my 2 study sites are. We really didn't hear a lot of our juveniles during that time, and we didn't get many return rates on our juveniles. So that is a area of concern that's been raised through this initial research, like, this might be one of those annual life cycle phases that is quite in jeopardy. We also had some really cool results through Motus and the partnership that we have with folks in Central and South America, that we were able to see some of our kestrels go much farther than we thought. We've got a couple of areas here or a couple of different birds here that have gone all the way down to the Veracruz area in Mexico. And again, I have 2 more birds this year that have spent time all the way farther south than Texas, is what we had assumed. So just want to say that we had a lot of great, interesting finds. And we do realize that there is low nest site fidelity, but there isn't low site return fidelity. We have a lot of our banded birds that do return, and now that we're out there more, we're able to see them more. We've even had a couple of our birds with Motus tags back in hand, which I've done telemetry on many different species and never get them back in hand while they're still alive, and everything is great, and the tags are wearing really well. So that's been awesome to see. But our Motus detections are much higher than they were with band returns. We did get a lot of great information on kestrels, and that we're able to ask future questions. That low detection rate of juveniles on migration and returning has been where we're zeroing in on our efforts, and we are looking into using different technology now on kestrels to get some more fine-pointed answers. And we're using the flicker tag that was developed by Cellular Tracking Technologies, and we've deployed 7 so far. We have 3 more left to go, and it's really great information that we're able to receive from kestrels. Again, they're that size that they can support a little bit bigger transmitter, and we've only focused on juveniles for that work. Whew, I just want to thank everybody. I hope you guys are still there because I can't tell, but thank all the folks.
Everybody's here.
Yay. I just want to thank everybody that has helped with this project. It's been phenomenal work of collaboration and partnership. The folks in this picture are the ones who let me in on their kestrel banding work to use their project and existing Nestbox programs to band with. And then these are a lot of the folks that helped me do the banding, helped put on the tags, helped deploy towers. This is Frank Nicoletti down here in the corner. They helped, they shared the SAC-ZIM Nestbox sites. We've even supported graduate students. This is Hallie Lambo. She's just about to defend her master's on kestrel work using stable isotope analysis for some dietary work. And that's me. That's my email. Please get a hold of me if you've got any questions on Motus or kestrels, and I'd be happy to chat.
Woo! That was exactly 10 minutes. You did great.
Boom.
Yay! Well done.
And I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for sharing that awesome work. Appreciate it. Okay, moving right along. I'm turning it over to Chris Tonra, who's a professor at The Ohio State. He makes me say that. He doesn't have. I'm sorry. I'm friends with everybody in the Midwest doing Motus, so I just make fun of everybody, but it's out of love. Okay, I'm turning it over to you, Chris. Thank you.
There's a little thing in my chair, which if we don't say "the," it shocks me. So, are you seeing my slides okay?
Yeah, it all looks good.
I'm sure I'll break the streak of everybody being on time. But So I'm just going to present, as you see, I'm not the first author on this presentation because this is Zoe Corpy, who's my master's student. I'm not sure if she's on the call or not, but just showing some of the work she's doing for her thesis. That's a big collaborative project. We seemingly keep adding collaborators to it just so we can get more tags out. But also there we go. So this project was kind of inspired by the fact that Lake Erie really is kind of the beachhead for offshore wind development on the Great Lakes. It's really looking like this project is going to go forward, this pilot project called Icebreaker off of Cleveland. Their plan is to install these 6 turbines. You can see pictured up there in that row of dots. And not to say that offshore wind is going to be a terrible thing, especially when we consider the need to reduce carbon emissions and everything. But I was concerned when I read an industry report from the folks behind this project that essentially based on weather radar stated that migratory birds, nocturnal migrants avoid crossing Lake Erie, avoid crossing the open water. Because we did a project on rusty blackbirds and Brian Dossman's PhD dissertation on redstarts and yellow-rumped warblers showed that over 70% of those birds, when tagged on the southern shoreline, ultimately cross the open water of the lake. So there's a disconnect here in terms of what they're inferring from weather radar and what we've seen when we track actual individuals using Motus. So we wanted to get a better idea of, one, how many birds are crossing the open water of Lake Erie, not so much the ones that have already reached the lakeshore, but the larger population that's passing through Ohio, and then also where most of them are crossing. So we can essentially come out the other end with a map of collision risk. So when turbine installations are planned, we can figure out kind of the spots that should be no-go zones, essentially, in terms of higher traffic migration pathways over the open water. Just to show kind of the status of our array. So Zoe, who we managed to hire away from the Northeast Motus collaboration for this work, is a force of nature. I'm hoping she never leaves because this is what our array looked like in Ohio coming out of COVID in 2002 after losing a lot of towers, and what it looks like today. So most of these towers have been funded now by Ohio Division of Wildlife. And so we also can look at the lakeshore and just see Lake Erie is a great place to look at something like lake crossing behavior because we essentially have towers going all the way around. And even we're actively working on the Ohio side to fill some of those remaining gaps. But so using the fact that we have this array, we wanted to deploy on migrants further south in the state, kind of along an east-west gradient, and then wound up actually extending the work into Pennsylvania with Powder Mill also deploying some of our tags for us. And this work was funded by a grant from the Upper Mississippi River Great Lakes joint venture to look at a suite of different migrants. We selected these species based on that they gave us some different life histories, short distance migrants, long distance, some taxonomic diversity, but also importantly, none of these species breed in Ohio. So we knew we could tag individuals during spring migration and be confident that they would continue north out of the state and potentially across the lake. And we worked at these, I guess now it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sites. And kind of, again, we're looking to go east-west across the state and then eventually added Powder Mill as well. So we have the kind of this western, central, and eastern deployment areas for all those different species. And this is just looking at essentially what we came away with. So the tracks are there and the different colored lines for the species we tag the most of. And then those arrows are essentially kind of the average tendency for direction. So our warblers generally were mostly heading to the northeast. And then you can see the white-throated sparrows, depending on where we tag them, had different trajectories. Really, the western birds went right through Michigan, did not cross the lake at all. A lot of the birds from the central region were crossing the lake. And then the birds further east were tending to head up into the northeast. Swainson's thrush, interestingly, they more converged on heading more or along that central route, potentially taking them across Lake Erie. And then originally, when we wrote this grant, we really wanted to target blackpoll warbler as now a focal species for the joint venture, and certainly a species a lot of us are concerned about. We wound up only catching one. That's the brown line there, but it actually gave us one of our best tracks in terms of it hit a lot of towers and did indeed fly across the lake and go through Long Point. And then we also did tag one Lincoln sparrow that also appeared to cross the lake. So this is just zooming in on the lake. A lot of lines going across the open water of Lake Erie there. One challenge, as you'll see, though, is a lot of these is we got a hit on one shoreline, but not both shorelines. So we really kind of designed the study with our deployment of towers and the existing towers, hoping we would get a lot of those South Shore detection, North Shore detection. We didn't get that many of those, unfortunately. And so that's why when we look at the graph, this is by our deployment location. So the blue bars are essentially the percentage of individuals where we got a confirmed lake crossing. So we got a tower hit on the South Shore, followed by a tower hit on the North Shore. Then we have all those maybes, which is we got a detection on either the North or South Shore, but not on both. And then we have the birds we can confirm based on their pathways that they did not cross. So birds potentially crossing in from all different deployment locations, and certainly looks like for our central deployment where we're directly south of the main body of the lake, it looks like the majority of those birds are crossing. But we're still working through ways to kind of go through a decision tree of when we only have one shoreline detection, ways to kind of classify our confidence in whether or not that's a lake crossing. And so one is going to be looking at the antenna directions of, were they detected by the antenna pointing over the open water, the geography of where the detection was. If we get a detection, the one detection is on Long Point, the chances that they went all the way around and then out onto the peninsula of Long Point during spring migration seems pretty low.
Tommy, you got 1 minute.
Okay, that's my last slide too, so good.
Oh,
yeah, so we're just figuring out ways to kind of at least have a decision method to go through and better classify our confidence in whether those are crossings or not. We're also looking into using movement models as well to do that more quantitatively, but just look for that more to come in the future. And I will end there. And there's my email if anybody needs it.
Great timing. God, you guys are good. I just need to be more stringent in the past, I think. Good job. Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate it. And to Zoe for your great work. All right, moving right along. Okay, next we will go to Mike Avera. With others on the project, he will be presenting on Saw-Whet Owl tagging project. Take it away, Mike's.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Nice. Wait. I see presenter view.
Oh.
Such a great sound.
How to stop share?
Yeah, there.
Yeah. All right.
You're killing our time, Mike.
Yeah.
You have 1 minute left. Nope. Go up to display settings. Right up at the top and say switch, swap, whatever. Oh, when you're in presenter, go back.
Where's your share?
No, sure. There. Stop sharing. Share.
And it's, so you have to do, where's your presenter mode?
Right here.
Okay, so we'll do this other one. This one, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can just uncheck presenter mode, and then it won't even be an option to show the notes.
How about now?
There we go.
Is that okay
Perfect.
now?
I can
Okay,
see
very
it.
good. Okay, so Mike and I are working together here. So, Sarah only gives a certain amount of time. So, and she gave Mike Vera more time than myself, Mike Ward. So I decided to co-opt Mike's time. So Mike and I are at the University of Illinois here in Urbana-Champaign, and we're talking about some owl projects, and kind of Mike will talk about this and the future of owl projects, and I'll talk about some wood thrush tagging work that we're going to do in Oaxaca. Thanks to the Fish and Wildlife for funding some of this, and there's many other people that help support this. So we're using Motus towers, but I wanted to bring this up, and Stu kind of brought this up earlier, and kind of a little bit different. So we have a site called Kennecott County Park where we're doing a lot of our sawwood banding, and we have 6 antennas, 6 towers, of which each tower has 6 antennas. So that allows us to get very high accuracy on bearing. So what direction the bird is from a tower. And then we can use multiple towers to triangulate. And we're using Sigma 8 hex units to do this. I used to use Cochrane units, Bill Cochrane units, but we moved over to Motus. I was concerned about masking, right? Because all the transmitters are at 168.30, then they could overlap and cause some issues in my ability to differentiate. But we found that we haven't really had any really serious issues with this. So it allows us to collect lots of data on stopover duration. We can get home ranges. We can look at activity patterns, a lot of things that, as Stu mentioned before, and as I talked about at the AOS meeting, I think there's a lot of data that we collect via Motus that could be used for additional investigation into the behavior and ecology of species. But with that, I'll turn it over to Mike to talk about the saw-whet owl behavior.
So right, as part of a study we're doing right now, we're looking at migratory stopover behavior of saw-whet owls in East Central Illinois, looking at factors impacting their departure decisions, how long they're staying over, if they're staying over the entire winter or just a short stopover as they're moving further south. And as Mike had mentioned, we're using these towers to look at their activity patterns, how frequently they're moving across the landscape, how large of an area they're ranging. It's a little bit of a replicate for previous studies that have looked at home range size for non-breeding season. We're also looking at the role of audio lures. Project Owlnet recommends using territorial tune call. We're interested in knowing how the birds are actually responding to this in terms of their behavior, either towards or away from different types of saw-whet owl calls. So we began our banding tagging efforts in 2021 and continued through 2023. We've captured 120 owls and tagged at least 62 of them. 50 of these tags were Motus tags at 166.380 megahertz. And we're looking at trying to get a better idea as well of migration routes, especially in Illinois. So just some preliminary results. Overall, what we've noticed is low activity rates for owls on their wintering grounds. They seem to be most active around dusk and dawn. Large wintering foraging areas seem to be the trend, with lower migration altitudes complicating determining effectively when birds depart, although we have had some very clear departures. So you can kind of tell based on the figure on the right there, these are just various stopover durations for individual owls. You can tell the longer, more solid bars are birds that we're sure were there for the entire duration of the winter. But while some stay the entire winter, there's others that are only stopping for a few weeks, days, or even just hours. So additionally, we've noticed that the migration pathways seem sporadic, some following both shores of Lake Michigan, east and west, and also Lake Huron. So kind of the whole beginning of all this was trying to get a better idea. Distribution and migratory patterns for the species were not well known. Current models don't even show the species in East Central Illinois. So as we look at migratory connectivity, previous studies have been done to try to get an idea of what migratory connectivity might exist. But owls have been known on several occasions to appear several hundred miles east or west of where a previous encounter was in a previous year. So there's something kind of unusual going on, and we're trying to better resolve. So this shows a map of detections. These are birds that were either caught at our station and then later encountered somewhere else, or birds that were caught at a prior station and then encountered in Illinois. And while Michigan and Wisconsin might have been expected, Pennsylvania seems a little bit odd for a small owl like this in Illinois. Here we have just a couple migratory trajectories from birds that we tagged last fall, and this is their spring migration north. So again, you can kind of see this exemplifying following the western coast of Lake Michigan, going up through the middle of Michigan, and then of course going through the Motus gauntlet of southern Ontario there. Thanks to Mackenzie, thanks Rich Keith. And then this shows a few detections that we've had both in the spring and the fall. So again, it kind of reflects that sporadic migratory pattern. And one thing kind of to the general audience that we're really kind of wondering about is when you've got an owl that has this kind of sporadic migration, how can you determine which points to exclude? So we've got some stars off there in New England, and or some even over in Nova Scotia. And, could that be true? I guess maybe. We're kind of looking into trying to dive deeper into that. So one thing I'd be remiss if I didn't mention is the fact that a lot of this is falling under the umbrella of the larger project collaboration, Project Owlnet. Satellite banding stations are loosely affiliated with this project. It's a working group. We currently have a working group that's looking to update station membership maps, generate working tagging protocols, and then refine research questions that could collaboratively be investigated across the network of participating stations. There are other tagging projects across the country, and I think even in Canada, and I've communicated with a few people here, but as you can tell, there are a lot of tags out there, and it'd be great. What we're moving towards is trying to coordinate that so that we can have more robust data and come up with more robust findings. So at least 13 different Motus projects have tagged saw-whet owls. Kind of leads to what began with the Northeast Motus project. And I know Dave Brinker's on this call as well, so if he's got anything to chime in, I'd encourage him to do so. But we just kind of put this in place just so everybody knew there was going to be a large deployment of saw-whet tags coming up. Sounds like in the Northeast, and we were looking in the Midwest to kind of piggyback off of this, increase sample size. One of the major goals is to look at there's kind of a specific migration pattern differentiating between males and females. So one of the focal points of this is to try to tag more males on their breeding grounds. Many of the, overwhelmingly, the birds that we tag in eastern central Illinois are females. Dave, did you want to add anything?
I don't know that
I just walked back into the room, so I missed most of what you said.
Okay.
We're getting our internet service installed today.
That's all right. Yeah, just mentioned kind of the focus on breeding males on their territories and trying to resolve this question of what might be going on difference between male and female migration and tag deployment in the Northeast.
Yeah, we've got a couple of nest box arrays, one in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan near Whitefish Point, another one in down east Maine, and then we may be able to collaborate with some folks in Quebec. And any nesting birds we get, we want to mark both the males and the females from those to look at this differential movement, and also the thought that they are semi-nomadic, or they move around between years quite a bit.
Exactly. Yep. So we are definitely looking for partners in the Midwest and see what we can do towards that. So regarding, so again, looking at migratory connectivity, sex-specific migration routes and behavior, just mentioned that, and stopover behavior, tagging on both migratory and wintering routes. And so the goal is to work with select banding stations, help train and attaching tags, and then using these as educational outreach opportunities. So there are currently 27 Motus stations in Illinois. Historically, they're distributed in places where tags were being deployed. We installed a fence of towers every 15 to 20 miles between Dubuque, Iowa, and Chicago, Illinois. We call this our northern fence. We're looking to do the same in a line roughly from St. Louis, Missouri to Evansville, Indiana this coming year in preparation for the wood thrush work, and then as well as filling in gaps in central Illinois along an I-72, I-74 corridor from Quincy to Danville. Hope is to provide verifiable higher resolution migratory data for birds moving through Illinois and about migratory trajectory and speed via multiple detections.
All right, thanks, Mike. So I'll take over now. So again, solid project's really interesting in the fact that we're getting birds all over the place. From band detections makes me think that for Motus, there could be some really interesting data to collect as the Motus system fills out. So wood thrush, as Sarah talked about, we're going to deploy 25 to 40 here in Illinois. We have a couple different areas. I'm still very interested in other data. So Ariel is going to talk next about rails, and I've been working with some other people. And one thing you can see from the Motus data sometimes is these birds practice migrating. They fly up in the sky, fly around for 15 minutes, checking out conditions, and they land, kind of chicken out. And so I'm excited with the wood thrush to look at this behavior here in Illinois and potentially other places. Here's our tagging locations we're going to do this summer in Illinois. We try to get a good geographic distribution. But, and as Sarah wrote down on the agenda, I'm not doing wood thrush work in Belize, though
I know, I apologize.
Well, I'm more than happy to go to Belize. So, but we're going to be working in Oaxaca. So here's the winter distribution. And you can see in Oaxaca, Veracruz, there's some birds in this area. And also there's some detections along the Pacific coast in Oaxaca and Chiapas, where we don't have a lot of data on what's going on there. There isn't too many Motus stations in Mexico. So Jill and Tony have several in Yucatan. There's a couple in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, a couple by Veracruz, like what Stu was showing that video from. And we're going to put up a couple more that should help out a lot of people, like especially like the Swainson thrush research. This is with Dr. Roberto Sosa. He's in Oaxaca. Ian and Susan Cole's here with him. We've been down there a couple times. We are planning to put 2 towers up on each side of the mountains that kind of go through Mexico. One in Titulán de Valle and Valle Nacional. These will be on both sides of the winter distribution. We think we'll catch a lot more birds on the east side as opposed to the west side of the mountains. Here is a picture that Roberto just showed me. Apparently it involves a mule, but we'll see how it goes. So we want to get the towers up on top of some of these mountains and to get some really good detection distances for these birds that migrate through this region. Valle Nacional is another important area on the east side. So the deployment plans are, we're going to deploy in the 2024 next winter. 25 tags. I'd like to put out more. We'll have to see. I'm actually flying down there this Thursday to check out locations, find materials to put up towers. And I hear that wood thrushes are not typically difficult to capture in winter. So if we can catch more, I'd like to put out more tags. We'll just have to see how it goes. And for people that know about some of our research, we're always working with whippoorwills as well. We know whippoorwills are wintering down there. We haven't been able to catch them yet in winter, but I have a sabbatical next semester. And so I'm going down to, I was telling Mike, I'm going down to Mexico and not coming back until I can catch eastern whippoorwills down there and put Motus tags on them. But regardless, we're going to be down there working. And if we can get some other birds down there, it would be a good place to tag them in winter and see where they go as they come back north. So I know we covered a lot, and time-wise, we should be okay. But please email Mike or I. If you're interested in the Saw-Whet Owl work, Mike is kind of taking lead, at least here in Illinois and hopefully in the Midwest. And then people interested in the work in Mexico, just let me know.
Awesome. Thank you to you both. Much appreciated. Always
We
doing
yield
great
our
work.
excess time.
You what?
We yield our excess time.
Thank you so much.
Now
I don't
remember
have
that.
any excess time. You're doing great. Right on schedule. Perfect. No, thank you guys. So a few notes. I'm sorry I messed up the agenda. That's Jeff Rederson's topic, which is later. So all of that's fine. I forgot to give the titles of the Mikes, which is Mike Avera is the avian lab manager at the Illinois Natural History Survey, and Mike is a professor at the Illinois Natural History Survey, University of Illinois. So thank you guys. And you should talk to Paz and Ernesto in Costa Rica because they use a horse to carry all of their Motus equipment up a mountain in Guatemala to place a station on top of a mountain. So you need to talk to them. I have a picture too. It's awesome. It's great. Okay. So thank you guys. As always, we're moving on to Ariel Fournier at the Illinois Natural History Survey again at the Forbes Research Station. She's the assistant research scientist there. So I am sharing her slides. So I will begin for you now, Ariel.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hold on, I need to share. Go with it. making too many jokes. I'm just trying to be funny, and I'm just losing my skills. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm here today to talk about our spring and fall rail migration projects we've had running the past couple of years. The spring migration project is the master's thesis topic for Chad Kramer, a master's student co-advised by Mike Ward and myself. And so I'm just going to kind of talk about the two projects together. Next slide, Sarah. I'm not going to spend a lot of time justifying why we're working on Rails. If you don't think they're awesome, that's a personal problem that you have. And so here we go. We've been catching them with walk-in traps during the spring with audio lures. That's what a trap looks like here. If you want more details on that, I'm glad to send it to folks. We run them here in Illinois from the middle of March until late May, and we've had a lot of luck in the spring catching a lot of them. In the past 3 years, we've put out about 180 tags. We've put out about 45 in the fall. The audio lure traps do not work as well in the fall, and so we go out at night and catch them by hand instead. But in both cases, we are putting out the tags along the Illinois River, primarily around the Emiquon Preserve, but some have been put out a little bit further up in the river valley as well, looking at questions about stopover duration, migratory departure decisions, and regional migratory movements. That was kind of the original scope of the project, and we've been able to get data back such that we should be able to look at some daily activity pattern information as well, which is very exciting. Next slide, please. Just wanted to share kind of some initial results that are coming out of Chad's thesis work. I believe some of you saw this from Chad at the AOS meeting last year. So these birds are largely departing pretty immediately after civil twilight, which makes a lot of sense. The limited data we did have suggested they were nocturnal migrants, and the Motus data confirms that. We're seeing a little bit of a variation among years, but that's just the way that it rolls. Next slide, Sarah. This slide is for Sora, and then the next one's for Virginia's. The green lines are detections from the yellow push pin as a spring migratory movement, and then the orange lines are fall migratory movements the following fall. So first of all, I just think this is cool because we just have basically no information about rail migration. But the thing that I think is extra interesting is that Bob Yates had a master's student at Winus Point in Ohio who did some nanotagging of Sora and Virginia rail several years ago. And Nicole, I can never remember her last name. Anyway, Nicole's birds were largely detected in like the eastern Great Lakes, like east of Lake Michigan, whereas our birds have almost exclusively been detected west of Lake Michigan, which I think is just a really interesting difference. At the time that Nicole was deploying tags, there were not a lot of towers west of Lake Michigan, so that could be an artifact of that, but we're not getting a lot of detections east of Lake Michigan, and there are still a lot of towers there. So just kind of some interesting patterns there and in kind of initial glance. Next slide, Sarah. And we see similar patterns for Virginia's as well. More data is coming in this fall, which has also been exciting. But yeah, we're excited to dig into this some more. And I guess you can do the next slide, Sarah. So this has been funded through a variety of sources, especially through the Illinois DNR, and has been a real team effort. There are some conversations happening within the Mississippi Flyway game and non-game tech sections about the potential of trying to do some coordinated Motus tagging of secretive marsh birds in the coming years. So if folks are interested in that or have questions about if that would be possible in your geography, I'm glad to chat about that. There's also some conversations going on about trying to do a flyway-wide king row project. Whether or not Motus is the right technology for the questions involved is an involving conversation there. But if folks are interested in that, glad to talk about that too. I did not follow the instructions and put my email address on here, but it's ariel@illinois.edu. I'll put my email address in the chat. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ariel. That was very efficient. I have so many questions about how you get those rails to go in those traps, but that's for another time. Okay. All right. Up next, thank you so much. Up next, we have Nick Bailey with Selva. Nick is the Migratory Ecology Director at Selva in Colombia. He'll be presenting on assessing connectivity, stopover use, and overwinter habitat quality of golden wing warblers through deployment of Motus tags in Costa Rica. I've been partnering with Nick and Selva, I don't even know how long now, but it's always really fun and I always learn a lot. So take it away, Nick.
Thank you, Sarah. Is my screen up? Am I all good?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah, so I just wanted to share a little bit about this project with golden wing warblers that Sarah mentioned in her introductory presentation. And there'll be some photos that Stu showed as well. So there's a lot of threads connecting these different projects. So as the title says, this was about understanding migratory connectivity between overwintering populations of golden wing warblers in Costa Rica and elsewhere, trying to get a little bit of a handle on stopover use and also overwinter habitat quality. Before I dive into kind of what we did and where, I really want to mention that this was really kind of a unique collaborative exercise that we undertook as a precursor to some of these much larger projects that different people have spoken about today. So particularly Sarah mentioned the massive wood thrush project that is coming down the line. This work was kind of, one of the first efforts just to see how the dynamics and logistics would work of trying to deploy large numbers of tags across different areas and getting lots of partners on board. So in the case of this study, all these people here on the left-hand side brought something different to the project. Some it was funding, some it was tags, some it was equipment, some was experience, some it was knowledge of sites and so on, and all came together for this effort in Costa Rica. And, above and beyond generating more information on golden wing warblers, this was very much about building partnerships between North and South, between the US and Canada and partners in the neotropics, which is really key to some of these broader, bigger scale Motus projects that we hope to see developed in the future.
Hey, Nick, sorry, you don't have 1 minute left. Can you minimize that note that says you're sharing your entire screen? Can you see that?
I can, yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, go ahead.
Assumed you weren't seeing that.
Go ahead, sorry.
So why did we carry this out? Well, I mean, I've just mentioned part of it. It was, the testing ground for this broader scale Motus collaboration. But the other reasons are more about golden wing warblers. And one of those is that Costa Rica is one of the winter grounds strongholds for the species, holds a significant percentage of the global population during the non-breeding period, as you can kind of surmise from this map on the right. And so it's really, there's a need to understand finer scale migratory connectivity of these populations in Costa Rica with breeding populations, but also of areas that they're using on migration. But also it's true of golden wing warblers, like many other species on breeding grounds, is that habitat quality and it's
that'll come in.
I love birds. I don't know what it is.
On different aspects of their full annual life cycle are not well described. So we were interested in this case in trying to describe habitat quality through understanding departure timing from the non-breeding grounds and also subsequent migration speed. And that's why we were deploying Motus tags to try and get this information. So where did we carry this out? So as I've said, we're in Costa Rica. We carried it out in a series of strongholds for overwintering golden wing warblers. And we set out a series of sites, basically 5 main sites across the precipitation gradient in this region. So for those who aren't familiar with how kind of habitats and ecosystems are defined throughout much of the neotropical region, precipitation is a major driving force. So it affects the type of vegetation you find, but often for overwintering neotropical migrants, it's determining habitat quality as well. So we're trying to cover as much as we could of this precipitation gradient across which birds are wintering, and also both slopes of Costa Rica. So the Caribbean and the Pacific slope of Costa Rica experience very different precipitation regimes in terms of the timing, not just the amount of rainfall. So this will influence habitat quality as well. And this study, as Sarah mentioned earlier on, began in 2022 with a pilot study funded by the CSUI grant. And then earlier this year, we undertook the main deployment of 50 tags on golden wing warblers. So what did it involve? Well, fairly standard field practice, going out, target netting these birds come rain or shine, using a combination of playback and well-placed mist nets to try and catch largely male birds, which are highly responsive to playback. We also did get a reasonable sample of females. Obviously, capturing them, banding them, fitting in all the birds with a Motus tag, but also color banding birds to get returns of birds when they came back to the wintering sites, because the tag batteries would have run out by the time they made it back to Costa Rica. And also key, as a couple of people have mentioned during this symposium, is we set up local Motus stations at each of our study sites to make sure we got data on the birds at the study sites. And obviously that's key to getting that data on departure timing. So here we're using primarily free element Yagis, which are really good for covering broad areas as opposed to picking up detections at great distance, which is not really the aim when you're tracking birds at a local site. So what do we get from this effort? So of a total of 69 birds tagged, we had so far, based on the data we've downloaded, 19 individuals were detected north of Costa Rica, either in the US or Canada. What we're finding is apparently very strong connectivity to what will be breeding populations in Minnesota and Wisconsin. So on this map, you can't really see the breeding distribution of golden wing warbs, but those of you who are familiar with it, much of the current global breeding population is located within those two states, and the majority of trajectories of birds seem to be heading that way. And we did have 2 birds detected in Ontario, so there does seem to be links also to birds within these Canadian populations, and just 1 individual that apparently is likely had a final destination within Appalachian breeding areas. And what's interesting is this relatively high concentration of birds through the Midwest, particularly through Missouri and Iowa, showing a very strong migration corridor up through the Mississippi flyway there. And not just it's acting as a flyway for the species en route to these breeding areas in Wisconsin and Minnesota, but also had evidence of some birds making stopovers. So 1 individual that was picked up on 2 stations in Missouri, separated by a couple of 100 kilometers, but by 7 days. So it wouldn't have taken the bird that long to fly there, so it must have made a stopover. So fairly good connectivity information with a relatively limited deployment coming out from it. In terms of getting a sense of habitat quality from departure timing and also migration speed, we're just beginning to delve into these data. There's a lot more to do, but this is kind of a very preliminary look, having worked on information from 3 of the sites. So we had departures from 1st of April through till the 27th of April. And what we found is earlier departures from what are the drier, slightly more disturbed sites relative to moister, more forested sites. And this ties in a little bit with what we found previously with Swainson's thrushes, where birds were also departing earlier from shade-grown coffee relative to what are presumed to be higher quality forest habitats. And presumably this may well translate into a slower migration speed in these earlier departing birds, and hence them migrating earlier, whereas the birds leaving from these moister, more forested areas can perhaps kind of overtake those earlier departing birds, much as we found for Swainson's thrushes. So that's the hypothesis we're working on for now. So that's really all I had to share with you today on the advances. Hopefully I've made up some of the lost time there, Sarah. And just again, a big thank you to all the different individuals, organizations, and so on who were involved in this work. And above all, to the birds. It's just an absolute pleasure to work with a bird like the golden wing warbler.
Thanks, Nick. Yes, thank you to the birds, or we would all be out of jobs. We'd all be out of jobs. Thank you, as always. Always great presentations and insights. I would say one takeaway from that is that my selfie game is strong. I need to chill on the selfies with friends when we're on trips, maybe. Okay, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Very insightful. Next, we will move to Jeff Ritterson. He's a field ornithologist with Massachusetts Audubon, and I will be sharing slides for him.
Hey, you got him. Good.
I got him. Yeah, hold on just 1 second for me and just tell me next.
A last minute scramble.
And wait, and yeah, unfortunately, we just have 5 minutes for Jeff. So take it away, Jeff.
I'm going to fly through these slides then. Thanks for having me. I wanted to take this chance to tell you a bit about a project that we just launched officially a few weeks ago. So not much data yet, but the project is titled Forestry Standards for Wintering Migratory Birds, funded by Neotropical Migratory Bird Conservation Act, with partners being our good friends at Program for Belize, Dave King at the U.S. Forest Service, Northern Research Station, and Mass Audubon. Next slide, please. So Program for Belize, an amazing organization, PFB for short, founded in the 1980s. Mass Audubon has been close friends with PFB since really the beginning, which helped for sure in sort of co-developing this proposal together. They own the 100,000 hectare Rio Bravo area in northwestern Belize there, and they manage it for biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. And so they run a sustainable logging program on about a third of that land. Next slide. And their logging program is their main source of revenue. It finances their other operations and is the reason why this land really remains forested. These photos show Rio Bravo on the left side of the road, and on the right is an area that was forested as recently as 8 years ago. So there's this need to identify land use activities that generate some level of economic activity while being compatible with biodiversity, and non-plantation forestry may fit the bill to some degree. Native vegetation is maintained instead of, for example, replacing the understory with a non-native crop. It can be practiced over large landscapes. And there's some evidence that this sort of lower impact logging that PFD conducts is relatively benign to biodiversity. But most studies have looked just at species richness instead of metrics like survival. Most studies have looked at logged versus unlogged areas instead of looking at, for example, range of practices or logging intensities. And few studies have looked specifically at the effects of logging on migratory birds. Next slide, please. And so the yellowish area on the left shows the sustainable logging area at Rio Bravo, and PFB has the location for every tree that has been harvested, as shown by the points on the right image, with the darker areas representing a higher intensity logging, or in this case, trees removed per hectare. Next slide, please. And so what we're up to is conducting a constant effort mist netting study across 20 sites across a gradient of harvest intensity, where we hope to get metrics like richness, abundance, change in body condition over time, age and sex ratios, survival estimates, hopefully. A subset of the wood thrushes we catch will get nano tags that we will do good old-fashioned telemetry on, tracking them through the forest to get habitat selection, survival estimates again, maybe some home range sizes. And then we'll install 3 Motus towers in the area to get departure dates, and then hopefully pick the birds up through the Motus network to get migration speed, some migratory connectivity information. And the idea is to relate everything back to habitat quality and logging activities to then generate some silvicultural prescriptions for birds, which can then be disseminated and applied at Rio Bravo and elsewhere. Next slide, please. And we'll have data on all bird species, migratory and resident species alike, which is great. And that gave me the excuse to put together this fun slide here. Next slide. So currently 3 Motus towers in Belize running sort of north to south. We'll be putting 3 more up, 2 on existing structures at Rio Bravo, a 3rd at a local grade school, which the school is super excited about. So am I. Tons of great educational opportunities there. Maybe starting a bird club, getting the kids and students out to the banding site to see that in action. Next slide, please. And then the project has capacity building objectives as well. We were able to find some extra money to get in the upper left there, Beatus Ash from the University of Belize involved in the project. She's the new MOSI coordinator for Central America, and she now knows how to create basic leg loop harnesses and deploy nanotags. Mike and Amir are the project's 2 young technicians, also paid. They come to the project with some really solid banding and telemetry experience, but they'll definitely be flexing those muscles a bunch over the next 5 months or so, and hopefully for year 2 as well. And then we have some of PFB's rangers and forestry staff also learning basic banding skills and telemetry. And then finally, we'll be holding workshops on banding, telemetry, some basic data management and or analysis that's open to the broader conservation community of Belize. Next slide.
I think that's it.
All right, great. That was it. So I flew through there hopefully.
Perfect. This is perfect timing.
Nailed it. Thanks, guys.
Perfect timing. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Yeah, just wanting to fold in some other projects that are clearly beyond our Midwest region, but that doesn't matter with Motus, does it? So thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. It's exciting work, and we certainly need more stations at capacity building in that part of the world. So that's awesome. Okay. Sam is next with dark-eyed junco tracking. Sam is a grad student with Ellen Ketterson, Indiana University, Bloomington. And so take it away, Sam.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. So our project is looking at the effect of light pollution on migratory behavior. As we know, urbanization is occurring and light pollution is becoming more prevalent each year. This is disruptive to migration, as we know, but additionally, light plays a role in life history timing for birds. And so in the spring, we know that temperate songbirds utilize photoperiod as their primary cue for reproductive and migratory timing. A previous study that came out of the Ketterson lab was looking at reproductive timing in conjunction with light pollution or light at night. And that project was run by Devraj Singh, and he found that birds that were exposed to light at night recrudesced their gonads earlier than those that were not. And so going off of that project, that was looking at reproductive timing. So we wanted to look at migratory timing. So the species that we were looking at is the dark-eyed junco, and they are a classic species that has been used for photoperiod studies. And then they're also a good one for our project because they winter in the eastern US and breed in Canada. So we know that all of our birds are going to migrate. So for our experiment, it was a hybrid captive and free living project. And we caught our birds in December at our aviary site, which is called Kent Farm. And we also have a Motus tower on that site. And so we housed our birds on site. And the birds that we caught, we did mixed sex and mixed age. So half of our birds were exposed to light at night at a 2 lux level, and half were not. And we also had windows in our room so that they had access to celestial light. And we held them for 8 weeks in January and February. And in the beginning of March, we tagged 39 birds with low-tech nano tags, and we released them on our capture site. So our main use for Motus was to determine a departure date from their wintering grounds. And we found that the birds left between March 27th and April 15th. Additionally, 36 out of our 39 birds were detected nearly every day at our primary tower, which indicated that they were sticking around our capture site after release and before they migrated. We do have 3 towers in our area, which is nice to kind of have that extra area covered. But we did find that there was no difference in departure dates between the different treatments. And that's looking at treatment and by age and sex. So there was 25 days between the release date and our first migration. So we've kind of speculated that maybe any potential treatment effect could have been lost between release and migration. But besides that, 26 of our birds were detected at non-local stations, so like along their migratory routes. And we found also that the juncos didn't display strong connectivity. So we had some that were detected in North Dakota, some went up Wisconsin, Northern Michigan, and we got some in Montreal as well. And also something to note is that our tags were programmed to last 63 days, so we may have missed the end of their migration. But yeah, so that was our project. Our number is, our project number is 550 if anyone is interested in looking at our maps or anything. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that update. Another different aspect of using Motus to look at different drivers like that. Appreciate it. I apologize. I didn't tell everybody that Sam does not have slides. There's lots of confusion looking for the slides. So sorry about that. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Sam. Next, we'll turn it over to Dale Gentry. Dale is the Director of Conservation for Audubon Upper Mississippi River region. He will be talking about mapping migratory stopover sites in Minnesota. So take it away, Dale. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to chat. And I also do not have any slides.
Thank you.
So be warned. No slides because no results. This is a brand new project that's just getting off the ground. We have funding from the state of Minnesota Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund to do a project that will integrate data sources from multiple types of data sources, including Motus data, to map migratory stopover sites across the state. We are just getting started with this project, and most relevant to this group, we will include a plan to put some Motus tags on a handful of species of greatest conservation need in the state, for which we don't have any Motus data that originate from Minnesota or nearby regions. And so we're still talking with partners about what those species will be. We had 4 species on the list to start, and I'm starting to worry that chimney swift might come off the list because we're having a hard time catching them. And I know other partners that we've talked with are having a hard time catching them. And so so we might not be able to implement that. But we're hoping to put tags on Minnesota's population of goldenwing warblers and bobolink and Henzo's sparrow. And I think we have partners in place for at least 2 of those 3 species right now, and are in conversations with others. So we'll integrate the data from Motus with eBird data and other tracking data to do a least cost paths analysis to look at migratory paths in the state, and hope to also have data from radar to then come up with some analysis of what stopover sites are preferred by large groups of birds in the state, and then develop a web-based decision support tool that we can share with partners, and some sort of blueprint for the conservation of sites that are perhaps more important as stopover sites than they are for breeding sites, such as some urban regions and areas, isolated patches of habitat, and otherwise agricultural matrix. So anybody has any questions, they're welcome to get in contact with me. My contact information is on the Audubon Mississippi River website.
Thanks, Dale. That's great. Thank you. Appreciate it. It's great to hear about up and coming projects as well, even if we don't have results yet. And it is 2:40, so I get a gold star because there's still 20 minutes left for questions. I'm such an idiot that makes me so happy. Okay, I hope you guys have been thinking of lots of good questions. Turn on your camera if you want, no pressure, but it's always a little bit easier to talk to one another maybe when we can see faces. Please raise your hand. The raise hand feature is in the top panel next to people, in between people and react, next to the smiley face. So raise your hand if you have questions, or just unmute. We really only have to raise a hand. There's a bunch of people. Okay, we're raising hands. All right, Deb Hahn, go ahead, please.
Sarah, thanks for this. It was really amazing. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
I would love, it may not be something that we get through here, but I would love to chat at some point about how, you know, in particular for like a Southern Wings or for the state agencies wanting to support annual life cycle conservation, how do we get this data and this information to a place that's useful to make those arguments and to get more funding and things like that? Because I mean, in each of these, I felt like I saw things I could use, but anyway, it's just kind of an open-ended question. And again, it may not be something we answer here, but I'd love to chat with you or others or think about it, how we might do that more efficiently, or maybe that already happens and I just don't know it does. And I just need to
No, I think that's great. Stu, do you have comments on that? You can't hear me. Can you hear me?
Unless it's in
Yeah, sorry, I'm on 2 calls right now, so it's a little bit.
That's good.
We should talk, Deb, I suppose, is not to take it outside of this conversation, but that's my first instinct, just what you're thinking of. Because it's all the kind of stuff that we're trying to figure out with the website and making the data the public or more accessible. Anyway, there's lots of cross links there. So I don't know how to close that loop appropriately.
No, I think that that's great. And I think that states do want to fund, more of this work. It's just, trying to make avenues for that. So I think that that's great. Certainly Motus is reaching many people to help make that argument. So
Yeah,
we'll certainly
I'll put my
connect.
email in the chat and you can always get in touch with me and then we can connect.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Thanks, Deb. For people who don't know, Deb runs the Southern Wings program with AFWA. Go ahead, David. Oh, wait.
Just thinking that Partners in Flight might be a good kind of model to look at. The West now for a little while, and they're constantly trying to figure out how they kind of funnel those data into conservation plans, et cetera. So they may be a good resource. And I know that some of the folks in this room probably sitting on some Partners in Flight groups for sure.
Definitely. There's also talks about creating a new subcommittee. I'm the co-chair of Partners in Flight with Alen, with ECCC, Environment and Climate Change Canada. And we are talking about a subcommittee looking at migratory ecology too. So lots of overlaps there. So that's great. Reach out to me if you're interested in that. It has not been formed yet, but if you're interested in being on a hemispheric group of that nature. Eileen, your hand is up. Do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. Eileen Dowd-Stucco, South Dakota Game Fish and Parks. We're on the fringes of this whole Motus operation, but I notice a lot of the projects are originating either on the breeding grounds or the wintering grounds. We run some migratory bird banding stations, and I wonder if there is a role for us to tag birds that may be part of your study, but maybe we don't know that. So hopefully that makes sense, but just wondering if we can contribute in a way that if we're not ready for the whole Motus Tower fencing that Canada does, is there a way we can help?
I can take an initial stab unless Stu, you have thoughts after that. I would say a role for banders that's really big to try to work towards putting up Motus stations at your banding station, just because that could have a lot of use in the future and kind of move you towards Motus tagging potentially in the future. In terms of tagging birds in the middle, I think a lot of the projects thus far, I can't speak for all the projects in the Midwest and beyond, but I think many of them are looking at migratory connectivity of where birds are breeding to where they're overwintering. So deploying a tag within range of a station is very key to get that first detection. Sometimes, in the past and even now, we'll deploy some tags. And if it's not within the range of a station to get that first detection, we don't know where the bird has ended up. Having that first detection is very, very important, and having those clear research questions to motivate that tagging, which I think a lot, all our projects do, but having that first detection is very key and really encouraged. Yeah. Stu, do you have more to add to that?
No, not directly. It's just the nature of the presentations today. We could have had a similar symposium just on migratory stuff. So there is a whole suite of more migration related questions. They're just a little bit trickier to, there's more things to deal with when you're studying migration. Assumptions, sorry.
Agree. But I do think that for banding stations, there is a really key role to play here in helping to contribute to the network. Often there's people visiting that site who are there and can check up on a station, and it just makes a lot of sense to be where people are handling birds. It just helps lead into Motus that much easier.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Ethan, go ahead.
Thank you all for putting this together. This has been great webinar. I guess my question probably is along the lines of Deb Hans, and probably Stu might be able to address it. As I've been messing around with RStudio a little bit, I'm wondering if there's some resources available for data access through R, and if you have any workshops or anything like that, so all of us can grab and distribute this data for those same kind of purposes. That makes sense.
Do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, data access is so the R package and the R book is the best starting place. If you haven't gone through there, it's pretty thick and kind of basic compared to what you might be looking for. Right now, to be honest, we just don't have the capacity to run the workshops and the type of really the type of stuff that the system demands at the moment. And we're really struggling now with how to deal with data permissions. So you can review the collaboration policy, which provides sort of basic level data available to everybody, but that's currently only available in our dashboard and through other things. So right now, the R package doesn't allow for you just to download whatever project's available, but we're working on that. At the moment, it needs to be done by specific requests to the projects. So if you know what species or what projects you want, like now, the short answer is now it's clunky. We're working on making it better, but there's mostly data permission issues that we need to sort out. To be frank, either everybody agrees that their data is open and it's easy, or we have to customize it and it's hard. And as much as we're trying to push towards open as much as possible, the reality is it's probably gonna have to be customized, at least at different levels. So I didn't really answer your question, but I might have provided a bit more context as to what you were working at. But if you have anything specific, we work a lot with trying to coordinate researchers with the network of people who have the data they want, and that's an efficient means so far, where we can connect you with everybody who's tagged golden winged warblers, for instance, and then usually, with a few exceptions, everybody will say sure, and then it kind of loops everybody together. Yeah, stay tuned. But I'm happy to have a separate conversation if there's something you're looking for, without necessarily getting into that here.
That answers it really well. Thank you. Actually, you did answer it well, and I hope that you can get the open data aggregated in some way, so it's like a massive data set of shareable stuff.
Yeah, there's about 6 billion detections right now.
Awesome.
So we joked about this early on, but the answer is always it's complicated.
Motus wildlife tracking system is complicated. Yes. Okay, thank you, Stu. Appreciate it. Thanks for the question, Ethan. Other people, no more questions? Come on. You have to have questions. Raise your hand if you have questions. I will just throw in two tiny stories. I promise they won't be super long. But there's somebody with a hand up. Haha. You're gonna have to wait on my cool stories. Tara, go ahead.
All right, can you guys hear me? My internet's been like slugging around, so I'm hoping I'm coming across clear.
I can hear you.
I guess, so my question is, so you have a tower, you start like getting permits, you want to dive into more of this tagging side of things. Are there any like workshops that can be shared amongst the groups for gaining experience with putting on Motus tags? Because I'm sure, other than it being fairly species specific on what you're trying to focus on, is there anything more generalized so that people trying to ramp up to that have the ability to plan ahead?
That's a great question, and it's certainly a need. As I said, yeah, we're having that training for the wood thrush project, but there is definitely a need and a lack of just general, I guess, and consistent workshops for tagging. And again, oftentimes it's more specific to a project, just because I know a lot of the coordinators in the bird banding lab are pushing to, have really strong research questions, or else, you won't be approved for tag authorization. And so oftentimes it's focused around the project, but that is certainly, I think, a need with consistency, is to have more of those trainings. And yes, Powder Mill Nature Center Sanctuary, I apologize if I'm saying it wrong, often has an annual Motus workshop. So look into that. Powder Mill, one word. They often have how to place a station as well as how to attach tags. I'm not sure when the last one they had of those was. I'm not sure if they've had one since COVID, but it is certainly a need. I agree. Just check the chat here, because some people are putting in ideas for workshops, but I agree, Tara. It's certainly a need over time. oftentimes I think what most people do is they seek out other people who have done tagging and go visit with them to get the hands-on training they need. Having a large-scale Motus tagging workshop is often difficult to capture enough of the birds so that everybody gets hands-on training. But I know that, okay, yep, there's more in the chat. So please reach out to people locally or in your state. Sometimes you can find that stuff on the Motus website, or you can reach out to me and other regional coordinators to ask for contacts in the region if you're looking for someone to meet up with, and we can at least put you together. You know, no guarantees, but we could at least link people up. That's what we're here for. Yeah, training is definitely a capacity need, no doubt. So to put that on people's radars as we move forward, it's certainly a need. And, you know, anytime there's a workshop like that, you get a lot of people signing up because there's just a really big need for that across the region and the hemisphere, for sure. Okay, hands up. We don't have to go to 3, but I'm going to tell you these 2 little stories. And so with Nick presented on the Golden Wing work, and now for 2 years in a row, we've had one of the Golden Wings that was tagged as one of those projects detected in Columbia, Missouri, in the town that I live in. It's really, really creepy. It's really amazing. And both of them were tagged on the coffee farm where we initiated the work with partners in the same coffee farm, and have gone past Columbia, Missouri, where I live, and then 20 miles west at a wildlife refuge 2 years in a row. It's just really wild out of such a relatively small sample. The first year that it happened, you know, myself and Kristen Heath-Aker and Dana Duke, both of which who are on this call. Hey guys, we went down there to help tag birds. We were down there for 1 week and we processed 5 golden wing warblers, and one of them was detected in Columbia. I have a picture of the bird and it flew right through our town. So it's just really wild. We all have anecdotal Motus stories, managing stations and tagging birds about fun stuff like that. So I don't see any other hands up. Last call. Last call for questions. Well, huge thanks, everybody. Thank you so much to our presenters. I just have a few words of wrap up here. Thank you so much for our presenters. Thank you for taking time. Thank you to Stu for being here. I know you have 10,000 other things to do. Thank you to folks from the Northeast Motus collaboration being on this call. I really have to put a shout out to them as really being like a role model of a group helping one another in the Northeast region. You've been such a huge role model for me in collaborations and partnership and friendship and just being willing to help for anything. I think that's just the model of Motus and how we're all supposed to be doing it. And it's going really well in that spirit. I will send out a link to, I will send out the links we've shared in the chat, because I think some guests on Teams don't see the chat. And so I will send out the links that have been shared in the chat. I will send out a link to the recording of this presentation or this webinar, probably in Google Drive. I will also please fill out the Google form for the Midwest Motus contact list. I put that in the chat before, and I will share that afterwards if you want to be a point of contact and list out, you know, what you have experience with so people can link up with you if they're in your state. We had, the most I saw was 107 people on this webinar. Thank you everybody for joining and caring about Motus and helping us all be better together. So everybody have 5 minutes of your day back and have a great week. Happy holidays. Bye.
Bye, Sarah. Thanks.